Okay, so now I pointed out that there's a relationship among these three things that we're looking at here: the global climate change, the potential impeachment of Trump, and the events that transpired at Standing Rock. I pointed out a couple of these things, that this guy Mark Feifel was brought in to run the operations, the public relations operations against the Lakota people. The head of the Tiger Swan Private Military Corporation that was brought in, this guy, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Reese, was the CIA liaison to the Joint Special Operations Committee of the Joint Special Operations Committee of the Pentagon. You know, so you could see some of the characters showing up there at Standing Rock that are part of this great, big, huge, bigger picture that's going on around the country. But we're going to go into more details about this, of how it is that Standing Rock is a microcosm of what it is, the macrocosm of the issues that you're facing here. And that's why it wasn't coincidental that Donald Trump, the second thing that he did was issue an executive order ordering them to go forward with the Dakota Access Pipeline. Okay, we're going to have a lot of discussions of that. And the reason that this is going to be so important, that the fundamental connection among all of these things is that you can't successfully impeach a president, as they discovered when they tried to impeach Clinton, unless you have totally delegitimatized his or her presidency. You have to be able to do that. And they were taking a pass at it by relying upon Robert Mueller to be able to prove that Trump was a Russian agent. And they were all sitting back hoping that he was going to put together that narrative so that it could reach out to everybody to go, oh no, what do you know? This guy is a stooge working for the Russians, you know? And you know, they've got the information, it's all lying there out in front of you. He was getting billions of dollars of loans from the Deutsche Bank, you know, in Greece somewhere, you know, and that was where the Russian oligarchs were depositing the money that they were embezzling by the billions in Russia, okay? And this bank was giving loans to Trump, and he was using the loans to build these great big Trump towers in condominiums around the world. And then the Russian oligarchs would come in and purchase one of the condominiums, or 6 of the condominiums in his big buildings, and they'd buy them for $10 million, and then they'd turn around and sell them for $8 million to somebody else. They were laundering the money through his towers, his Trump towers around the world. Okay, and so the evidence is all right in front of you for what they were doing, yeah. But that doesn't necessarily make him a traitor. What it does is it compromises him in a fundamental way to be leaning in the direction of Russia in making decisions that he makes, thereby explaining this constant bafflement that all the media have of why in the world is it that he acts the way he does toward Putin. You know, and the information's all right in front of us, okay? And so that effort to hang that on him, relying upon Mueller to do it, has failed. Because Mueller has said, I didn't find adequate evidence to convict him of the crime of conspiracy or collusion with Russia. And so now all of the regular Democratic Party people are all saying, well, it's really good news for us to discover that our president wasn't an agent for Russia, because Mueller said so. Now they back themselves into a corner saying, but what about this obstruction thing? You know, Mueller said, I wasn't able to exonerate the president. You know, that wasn't his job. A prosecutor isn't in the business of going around exonerating people. They're going around trying to determine whether or not there's enough evidence to indict them. And he didn't conclude there was. So that's a real loser, that whole operation. The reason that Donald Trump can be successfully impeached is because of his position on global climate change. He is a threat to humanity itself, not just because of him being an idiot, you know, with the finger on the button of nuclear weapons, you know, but because he is consciously engaged in destroying the world. And that narrative has to be articulated. That narrative has to be articulated. And the fact is that the regular Democratic Party of Nancy Pelosi and Schumer aren't going to do it. And why is that? Because they're being paid by the oil corporations for their campaigns. They're not going to do it. It doesn't take rocket science to understand that, okay? And so it's the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes that are going to make the move on them. And there are going to be other people that are going to run against the regular Democrats in the upcoming primaries in 2020 and to unseat them and move into the Congress to be able to take over the government. That's where this is going to come. And part of your job is going to be to help articulate the narrative about the dangers of global climate change and how completely outrageous it is to leave a person in the presidency of the United States who keeps on saying that it's a hoax and keeps on making fun of it, you know, while you and your children are not even going to be able to breathe outdoors by the time your kids are your age. You know, I mean, this is an absolute state of emergency that you're in. And the problem is you don't know it. You kind of suspect it, and you kind of hear about it, but you don't know it. You're not experiencing it cellularly, you know, and that's what one of the objectives is that we have in this class, is to try to get you to understand this on a cellular level of what the nature is of the catastrophe that is facing you right now, okay, unless dramatic action is undertaken by you, not by everybody else, but by you. If you aren't willing at the end of this class to take the kind of dramatic action that's necessary to save yourself and your children, you need to remember, all species are not destined to survive. And we are fouling our own nest and contaminating ourselves and not having the perspective to see it. Okay? So you have to have a different perspective. You know, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know, delivers a really effective speech on the floor about global climate change, Donald Trump goes to Michigan or somewhere in the middle of a big rally and makes fun of it, saying, "Oh dear, is the wind blowing? I want to watch television." You know, like the wind power has to be blowing wind for your electricity to be working to watch television. I mean, talk about an ignorant asshole. I mean, there he is in the presidency of the United States, and everybody's sitting there saying, "Well, wasn't that funny?" I mean, oh dear, is the wind blowing? I'd like to watch television. Throw this guy in the street. You know, I mean, this is totally ridiculous for people to sit back and simply tolerate this kind of stuff. You know, that you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it. You know, and it's not going to do me any good to say, "I told you so." Because I'm telling you now. So, and now what's going to happen is, just so you know what's getting ready to happen, there's not any doubt at all about what's getting ready to happen. I mean, it helps to have 50 years of experience in this field. But, you know, the regular Democratic Party of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are getting ready to nominate Joe Biden for president. You know, they're going to nominate Joe Biden for president. And he's going to reach out and get Kamala Harris to be his vice president. He's going to agree to only run for one term because of his age. And then he's opening on to the first woman president, and a person, a non-Caucasian pure person, to be the president, the first woman. Isn't that great? And it's going to be bumper stickers on the back of the cars. Let's get back to normal. Elect Joe Biden. Let's get back to normal. Normal ain't all that great, I can tell you. You know, because Hillary Clinton, if she had gotten elected, was talking about reducing global climate change, you know, the annual emissions by 33% by 2040. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change say you have to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions by 70% by 2025. Or else we are wedded to catastrophe. And yet, Hillary Clinton and the regular Democratic Party are proposing, 33% by 2040. 40. And why is that? Because it's easy to dance to, right? I mean, it's got a nice round number to it, and you don't scare too many people. They all realize that something ought to be done. Doing something is better than nothing, and that's the standard they use. You know what Greta said? Does everybody here know Greta Thunberg? How many people know who Greta Thunberg is? Okay, good. So that's one of your assignments for tonight. Is you go home, you put up on your screen Greta Thunberg, okay, and you're going to see who Greta Thunberg is, and what she said to the Global Climate Summit meeting that was held in Poland this last fall, and you'll see, okay. Now, because what the regular Democratic Party is going to be advocating is that we have to be very careful here, because we're not going to impeach Donald Trump for the very reason you said, because we're not sure we can get enough Republicans to convict him in the Senate. And why should we go through this and then have him not be convicted? Because he's going to run around saying, look, I won, I'm innocent, etc. So we can't do that. And they said, so that we're going to try to beat him in the election. And now what they're going to say is, look, this guy is a formidable opponent in the election. Now, we're not going to impeach him, but he's a formidable opponent in the election coming up. Look how he has surprised us back in 2018 or 2016. Look how he totally surprised us. We have to be really careful. We can't go too far left. We can't go too far left. You know, all these people talking about they won't even say it. But we can't go there. You know, we have to stay normal. We have to stay regular. You want to stay with the regular Democratic Party. We don't scare anybody, you know. And so look at, stay with us. Don't go too far to the left. Let's all the patriotic people back away from supporting any of those candidates that talk about democratic socialism. Don't go there. Boy, that's the third rail. That's death, you know. And it'll be your fault if we lose to Donald Trump, because we're not going to impeach him, and we're going to run an election against him. And if you go too far to the left and we lose, it's going to be your fault. That's what Father Bill Davis used to say to us at the Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C. He said, you know, you spent time in Washington, D.C. He said, if the Republican Party advocated a law executing everybody over 6 feet tall in order to kind of keep the budget down, the Democrats would come in and say, how about 6'2"? How about you all get on board and pass a law executing everybody over 6'2"? Because if you don't do this, it's going to be your fault. All those extra people that are going to get killed. Okay? That's exactly how they function in Washington, D.C. I was there for 20 years. I mean, it's completely ridiculous the way they act. You know, they're like complete aimless relativists in that place. And they allow the Republicans in the right wing to set the agenda, because they're afraid of them. They're literally afraid of them. They're intimidated by these people because they're threatening violence all the time. You know, and Trump, I don't know if all you heard him. He said, you know, I've got the military on my side, and I've got the police on my side, he said, and I've got the bikers, he said proudly. I got the bikers on my side, and you don't want to make them mad, because it could get really very, very bad for you. That's what he said on national television. And he says, if the Democrats try to impeach me, there's going to be rioting in the streets. I can guarantee it, he said. Now, when you say things like that to a mealy-mouthed Democrat, I mean, they just freak right out and go, whoo, you know, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? I mean, how, you know, here, tell me what I need to do to keep that from happening. And that's what happens. And so unless we mobilize all of the progressives, and we mobilize everybody in the millennial generation now to come out and vote, and we mobilize everybody in the baby boomers, that all the progressives and the baby boomers to come out and vote and support a progressive agenda, a full progressive agenda, And we've got to get Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, we've got to get them to tell us who their cabinet is going to be. They got to tell us who their cabinet's going to be. They got to tell us what their policies are going to be. What kind of taxing structure are they going to have? What type of a military budget are they actually going to support? What are they going to do about the troops in Afghanistan? Are they going to pull them out of there? They can't just go around saying this is a personality contest. Here, trust me. Put me in and trust me. They've got to tell what they're going to do. And they got to have people that are competent in charge of those executive branch agencies. They got enough candidates right now to run all the cabinets. All they have to do is divide them up. Figure out who they're going to have for their executive branch people. And they've got to get that set of policies put in as the Democratic Party platform at the Democratic Convention. That's what they've got to do. And they've got to dare people like Joe Biden and the others to defy them on that. And they've got to have so much power, so much citizen support for what it is that they're saying that the regular Democrats aren't going to dare not accept that. Okay? But you can't trust them to elect them because they won't implement it. They'll just pass it in the convention and then they'll ignore it. So you've got to have progressives in those offices. Now, that having been said, I want to say another thing before we leave here, is that one of the fundamental problems that the progressives have, and I just did this in the keynote to the founding of the California Progressive Alliance this last weekend. They asked me to do the keynote, and so I did. And I said one of the fundamental problems that the progressive community has is that they do not genuinely understand spirituality. They conflate the spirituality with traditional religious institutions, which they reject for the most part because of the lunacy on the part of a lot of the institutions. And the pedophiles and stuff in the Catholic Church, and the ridiculous stuff that the Islamic people do in the name of religion and all that. So what they've done is they've jettisoned the very idea of spirituality. And they don't really understand what spirituality is. Now, every single one of the major worldviews, from authoritarians on the right to reactionaries to conservatives to moderates to liberals to progressives to utopianists, all have their own cosmology. And they all have their own teleological theories of the unfolding of the universe. And they all have their own ontological theories about the origins of consciousness in the universe. And they all have their own epistemological assumptions about the means that we have at our disposal as human beings by means of which we can possibly answer questions like that. And we'll talk a lot about that because that's all very confusing. But the fact of the matter is, if you answer all of those four major pillar questions in a way that are internally self-referentially consistent, it generates a mode of ethical reasoning. And every single one of the worldviews that is driven by a given mode of ethical reasoning has its own unique mode of spiritual expression. And the progressives don't know that. And they don't realize yet what the mode of spiritual expression is. But it's radical monism. It is the thing that was talked about by Plato. It was talked about by Socrates. It was talked about by Pythagoras. And the fact is, they never teach you this stuff in the schools. They just take a pass at reading Plato. I read Plato's Republic. Oh, wow, I know everything now. You don't know anything. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about in this course is the theory of natural law and radical monism. And I'll close with this so you can be reflecting on it when we come back Thursday, is that the natural law presumes that the sum total of the ultimately irreducible integers of matter in the entire universe, which they used to call atoms back in the ancient Greek days, but we now know to be inchoate quantum fields, okay? That the sum total of ultimately irreducible integers of matter in the entire universe are finite, and they can neither be created nor destroyed. And they manifest in the material realm in two forms: mass or energy. And you can transform mass into energy and energy into mass, but you can't change the sum total. And every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe is attracted to every other one. And as you remember from your high school physics course, if you don't remember anything else, which most of us don't, is that the degree of attraction between every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire universe, the degree of attraction between them is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. But it still remains. And therefore, the entire universe is bonded together in one unified harmonic whole. And there's an actual phenomenon that bonds the universe together. And the understanding of natural law is that our human species has a faculty, like seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting or touching. We have a faculty that is evolving in us, teleologically, unfolding, that is able to directly, experientially encounter that unitive phenomenon. And as a result of that direct experience, we can know what human conduct, both individually and collectively, is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of being. That's the key. That's the key that we've lost, why we're out of touch with our earth, we're out of touch with nature, we're out of touch with reality itself. And we have to get that back. And so one of the missions that we have here is trying to infuse the progressive movement with a genuine understanding of spirituality that is not sectarian, it isn't denominational, it isn't trying to recruit anybody to be in one religion or another, but you have to understand what the fundamental root of natural law is that undergirds our entire Constitution, that supports the proposition that we are each endowed with fundamental human rights. And that this is what is at the base of our understanding of democracy. And we have to function. We have to function in order to save ourselves and the rest of the planet. So with that, I will see you Thursday. And we'll be able to have more questions and answers on Thursday. But I want you to bring at least one person, one of your other classmates, who hasn't yet decided what she or he is going to be taking for their courses, and bring them here, because it's going to take a little more than us here today to save the world. Okay? Great. Thank you. Okay. Now, see, this is more like it. Here we go. Now, this is the trajectory of justice class that a lot of you who weren't here on Tuesday, I'm delighted to see you all. And I'm very happy that all of you who were here on Tuesday have gone to work to help get other kids to come to this, because this is going to be a fairly extraordinary class, as we talked about on Tuesday. And I'm going to do something here today that I've never done. I've been teaching law school and undergraduate and graduate school classes around the country over time. I've never before ever actually used the bulk of a class to show you a particular video, but I'm going to do it today, primarily because this is sort of a definitive piece that has to do with one of the three major issues that we're going to be dealing with in the class, and that is the potential impeachment of Donald Trump. The three major themes, of course, are the impeachment of Donald Trump and its relationship to the global climate change crisis that's going to be confronting all of you as you go out into the world here from the university. We're talking about that and how it relates, interestingly, to the confrontation that took place at Standing Rock up in North Dakota, with the Lakota people rising up against the Dakota Access Pipeline. And very interestingly, you're going to see here today, right in front of you, something that I would say that 99.9% of the people in the country are not going to get it. They're not going to see something that happens here in this video. This is the video that we were looking for. Now, I don't imagine any of you have got a chance to do it yet, but you'll see that on the assignment sheet, for today's lecture, you'll see that there was at the bottom of your reading and videos, those of you who were here on Tuesday, you'll see that there's a thing called Spygate, part 1 and 2. That's a video. I know that virtually none of you have got. Has anybody here gotten to see it yet? Okay, good. Let's go. Pretty far out, isn't it? Okay. What the Spygate thing is that I want you guys all to get a look at here, perhaps over the weekend when you get more time. That is a two-part presentation that was made, super slick, very expensive, real high quality done. It's a 35-minute part 1 and a 45-minute part 2. And it is the full-blown narrative of the anti-Trump impeachment people. This is a video that was prepared. I investigated to find out who actually had done this, and it turns out it's funded by Chinese Falun Gong people, really surprisingly. And it is a major piece asserting that this entire effort to generate an impeachment of Donald Trump is a covert operation of the national security state of the United States. The CIA and the NSA and the covert operations people, the Division 5 people that we call the 5 Squad in FBI, that this is a false narrative, a complete fabrication to try to suggest that Trump and his associates in his campaign were somehow colluding or working in cooperation with people from Russia to undermine our American election in 2016. And you're going to see that. That's not what we're going to show today. That is the slickest piece of work that I've seen in a long time, setting forth a completely false scenario. And I want you to get to look at it this weekend because you're going to look at it and you're going to be persuaded by it, because that's what it's designed to do. It's very much crafted for Americans, directed to you. And what you'll see is that of the some 400 data points of alleged fact in the entire production, probably 375 of them are completely true. But what they've done is they've strung them together and presented them in a particular way that in fact gives you the impression that in fact this was in fact a deep state operation, a covert operation to get rid of Donald Trump. And so what I want to do today is I want to show you we're looking for a comparable narrative that sets forth the entire evidence in a persuasive way supportive of his impeachment. And it was just this week that it happened, that it turns out PBS Frontline has done a big 90-minute documentary setting forth the evidence and the information in a way that's as slick as the other. And so what I want to do before next week, we're going to be Dr. John Conway, the PhD graduate from UC Santa Barbara, is going to be directing a lot of discussion toward the global climate change crisis, which is the overarching crisis, strategic crisis in the context of which this impeachment is taking place, in the context in which the Standing Rock Uprising took place. So what I want to do, though, in this week is I want to get this information up in front of you. So I want you to see this, and I want you to see the other piece, the Spygate thing. I want you to take a look at this weekend. Now, of the people that were here on Tuesday, how many of you went and found out who Greta Thunberg is? Okay, kids. But okay. So I'm not going to tell you Again, I want you to go find it out. It's very simple. It's a matter of just going on Google Greta Thunberg, Thurmberg, Thunberg, and you'll find her. Okay? To give you some, she's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's 15 years old. Okay? But I want you to go and see who she is. Okay? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you this, and we'll cut it off at a point at like an hour and 5 minutes, because there's an event that happens on the video here just at that point that makes the entire point of the class that we're going to be dealing with. And as I said, 99.9% of the people in the whole world that ever watch this thing aren't going to understand what you're looking at. And I'll explain it to you when we get done with this, okay? So I want to show you this, and then we'll cut it off at about an hour and 5 minutes, and then we'll be able to have some discussion about this, okay? And obviously the syllabus is here for anybody who hasn't gotten a copy of it yet. The books are all up on reserve now. The two main ones that you're going to be seeing are these two here. This is the case for impeaching Trump. This is Liz Holtzman. Liz Holtzman was a congresswoman from New York City that was on the House Judiciary Committee that returned the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. And this is Alan Dershowitz's book, The Case Against the Impeachment. You see they're little books. They're not big tomes or anything that you have to read. And there are assignments out of these, and they're on reserve. Okay, there's a couple. Okay, they will if they're not there yet. Okay, and that there's another couple of books here that we'll stick up there just in case you want to see them. This is the book by Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe is the constitutional law professor at Harvard Law School who actually beat out Alan Dershowitz for the position at Harvard. That Alan was very much relying upon becoming the new constitutional law professor at Harvard when Paul Freund retired. But it was Lawrence Tribe that got the position. And he has laid out another book on the whole analysis of the impeachment process that we haven't assigned yet. But I'll get that on reserve. And then there's another whole major work on focusing on just the collusion with Russia, specifically in here, okay? And they'll be available. But I want you to take a look at this right now. We'll kill these lights. We'll crank the thing up for you. Because he's suggesting that the quadrupling of the energy, the oil output in the United States and North America is antithetical to the interests of Russia. And therefore, it's silly to suggest that they're cooperating together. It's important to just listen to him say it again. He just kind of slides it right through here.
And what his staff does, whether his campaign aides do or did not do, that's what really matters.
Right here.
There's a narrative that always underlay much of the investigation, which was that here's a man who does everything Putin wants him to do. And so that creates a suspicion. And what I find so difficult about that is that he has done very well the one thing that hurts the Russians most, that brought down the Soviet Union in the mid-'80s, which is suppress our energy policy to really endanger their core financial...
Okay, that's it. Okay, let's turn the lights on here for the time that we have left here. That the reason that this is so important is because what you're going to find out when you check this, remember, the Secretary of State picked by Donald Trump was Rex Tillerson, who was in fact the CEO for ExxonMobil. And he had been given the highest award of the Russian government for setting up a contract between ExxonMobil and Russia to develop the Russian oil under the Caspian Sea. So that what's really going on here is that in Boyden Gray, who was the lawyer for George Bush Sr., we'll get into this in the course. George Bush Sr. is the one who ordered the invasion of the Middle Eastern oil fields under the ruse that Saddam Hussein was in fact invading Kuwait. Now, we'll get into some detail on this, but exactly what you're going to see had happened is that as soon as George Bush Sr., back in 1991, started getting indications that the Soviet Union was going to be dissolving because Gorbachev was engaged in glasnost and perestroika, which I'll give you a bunch of information on, in that they were getting set to step back and release all of the republics that were in the Soviet Union. As soon as Bush heard that, he said, this means that we're going to lose our ultimate enemy, that we've been using the existence of Russia for 75 years as a justification for multi-billion dollars, $700 billion a year in military funds. And we're getting set to lose them. So what he decided he was going to do, what he did is we'll get into the details, Bush Sr. sent a personal handwritten note to Saddam Hussein through our ambassador to Iraq, April Gillespie, a handwritten note from George Bush Sr. saying, I know that you're having trouble with Kuwait on your southern border, and you believe that Kuwait is slant drilling under your borders and stealing your oil from Iraq. I would like you to resolve this peacefully, but I want you to know that if in fact you find it necessary to resort to the use of military force against Kuwait, I would not personally view that as contrary to the long-term best interests of the United States. And so what happens is, not surprisingly, Saddam Hussein mobilizes 10,000 Iraqi troops and sends them to the southern border of Iraq, the northern border of Kuwait, preparing to go in and use military force against them. And what happens is his Secretary of Defense, George Bush Sr.'s Secretary of Defense, Boyden Gray's president, whom he's the lawyer for, George Bush, his attorney, his Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, contacts the ambassador of the United States from Saudi Arabia, whose name is Prince Bandar. And he invites Prince Bandar to come to the West Wing, and he brings him into a meeting. And Dick Cheney is there, and Paul Wolfowitz is there, and Scooter Libby is there, and Doug Fife is there. And what they do is Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz say to Prince Bandar from Saudi Arabia, look, we have high-level U.S. intelligence indicating that Saddam Hussein is getting ready to invade Kuwait. And he shows him real-time NSA photographs of the assembling of the troops on the border between Iraq and Kuwait, and saying, see, here's real-time NSA satellite photos of them gathering on the border, and they're getting set to invade Kuwait, and we have equally solid intelligence that Saddam Hussein, once he goes into Kuwait and occupies them, is going to be invading Saudi Arabia and is going to be ousting the House of Saud. And I want you, this is Dick Cheney, wants you, Prince Bandar, the ambassador of the United States from Saudi Arabia, to set up a meeting with me so I can go and meet with King Faoud and Crown Prince Abdullah. I want to invoke an old secret 1972 secret treaty that was signed by Richard Nixon and his Secretary of State at that time, Henry Kissinger, that we're going to talk about in this course. They entered into an agreement to allow Saudi Arabia to increase the cost of gas at the pump from 42 cents a gallon at that time to $1.42 a gallon, as long as Saudi Arabia would agree that it would use that extra $1 a gallon at the pump to, number one, buy exclusively U.S. military equipment, like the big AWACS, airborne radar, the over-the-horizon radar, in addition to that, in major F-14 fighter planes, et cetera. Number one, use that extra $1 a gallon at the pump to purchase exclusive military equipment from the United States. Secondly, that they would agree to use additional amounts of that $1 extra a gallon at the pump going to Saudi Arabia, to use additional amounts of that money to dredge out the harbors of Saudi Arabia, to be able to take American warships, and also to build major military bases that would take U.S. Air transports, bringing in U.S. military people into Saudi Arabia. And thirdly, they had to agree that in the event that either Russia or China made any type of a feint toward moving and occupying the Middle Eastern oil fields, that Saudi Arabia would agree to invite the United States to come in and to protect Saudi Arabia against such an invasion from China or Russia. Okay? In exchange for that, they would get an agreement that the Saudi Arabia would extend the 60-year exclusive lease agreement that had been signed at the end of World War I, granting to Western oil companies, the 7 major oil companies, they talk about making up the 7 sisters, the oil companies, they call it Aramco, the Arab American Oil Corporation. Okay, that's made up of ExxonMobil, Standard Oil of New Jersey, Standard Oil of California, the Royal Dutch Shell, British Petroleum, and others, that they have exclusive possession of the oil in Saudi Arabia. And Prince Faisal, or King Faisal, had signed that agreement at the end of the First World War, that in the agreement was that 90% of all the profits for the development of the oil in Saudi Arabia come to the Western oil corporations, and that the remaining 5 to 8% of the money would be paid directly to the Saudi royal family, not to their country, but to the family itself, making them super rich, multi-billionaires, having some 400 princes that would all be multi-millionaires. And this agreement that was made in 1972, in August of 1972, was in place. And what the Defense Secretary, Dick Cheney, wanted to do after instigating Saddam Hussein from Iraq, after instigating him to go down and take military action against Kuwait, used this as an excuse for triggering the 1972 treaty, which was only applicable against China and Russia. But he wanted to apply it against Saddam Hussein and say that if in fact Saddam Hussein goes in and invades Kuwait, he wants Saudi Arabia to invoke the treaty and invite the United States military to come in and occupy the oil fields. So what happens, of course, is that he did go in. Saddam Hussein went in and invaded Kuwait, and immediately Dick Cheney contacts Prince Bandar and said, "See, I told you so." And now he's getting set to go in and invade Saudi Arabia after this. And so I want you to set up a meeting for me to go into Saudi Arabia to sit down with King Farouk and Crown Prince Abdullah to talk them into triggering the 1972 secret treaty, okay, but applying it against Saddam Hussein. And that's what he did. He goes into Saudi Arabia, sits down, has a meeting with King Farouk and Crown Prince Abdullah, and asks them to invoke the treaty in 1972 and invite the United States to come in and occupy the Saudi Arabia to protect them, okay? And what happens, this is key, I want you to remember this, and I'll let you go. What happened is when he did that, the chief of security for the House of Saud, Turki bin Faisal, who was the son of King Faisal earlier, who had not ascended to the throne because King Faisal had been assassinated. And so King Faisal's older brother, Farouk, had become the king of Saudi Arabia. But Turki bin Faisal, his son, was made the chief of security. And he found out about this meeting, and he went to King Farouk and Crown Prince Abdullah, and he said, "Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't invite the infidels into the Holy Lands. Because if they come in under the guise of driving out Saddam Hussein and driving him back out of Kuwait, back up into Iraq, they're going to stay here. So I have another alternative for you. Please give me a chance to have a meeting with you, King Faoud and Crown Prince Abdullah, in the morning at 10 o'clock the next morning, and I'll give you an alternative to this. So he did. He comes in the next morning at 10 o'clock, and he brings into the meeting with this is Turki bin Faisal, the chief of security of the House of Saud and Saudi Arabia, brings into the meeting Mohammed Baroum, who is the heir to the wealthiest family in all of Saudi Arabia that made hundreds of billions of dollars building these airstrips and dredging out these harbors, right? And he brings in with him also Khalil Mahfouz, who is the head of the Royal Saudi Bank, family bank. And they come into the meeting, the three of them, the Turki bin Faisal, Mohammed Baroum, and Khalil Mahfouz. They come into the meeting and they say, don't invite the infidels into the Holy Lands. Don't invite them in. We have another alternative. And they turn and they open the door, and in walks Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, the best friend of Turki bin Faisal since they were boys together. And he comes in and says, do not invite the infidels into the Holy Lands. I can kick out Saddam Hussein, who's down in Kuwait now. I will kick him out because I have 10,000 battle-hardened Mujahideen fighters who have just gotten through kicking the crap out of the Soviet Union for their invasion of Afghanistan. And they're all up in the Khyber Pass. They're perfectly prepared to kick Saddam Hussein out of here. So don't do this, because if you invite the infidels in, they will not leave. They will come in and occupy the Holy Lands. You can't do this. And so that he gets up and puts charts up and shows how he can drive him out and does this whole thing for 2.5 hours. He puts on this presentation and then leaves. And then it turns out that Dick Cheney was still there at the palace. And he found out about this. And so he insists upon having another meeting with King Faoud and Crown Prince Abdullah and said, okay, I found out that Turki bin Faisal is offering this other option. I'm going to sweeten our deal. That not only will we agree, if you will agree to invite the United States in to bring in our warships to occupy these dredged out harbors and to occupy the military bases, we'll not only drive Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait and keep him from invading Saudi Arabia, which was a big fat lie to begin with, we will protect you here, the royal family, the royal Saudi royal family, will protect you against your own citizens. We will keep you in power here because you know your citizens hate you. They hate all of the royal family who are going around, with all of them have like 18, Rolls Royces, and they go gambling all around Europe, losing $1 million on the throw of dice at Monte Carlo. Okay? And they will protect you against your own people if you will invite us in. And that's what happened. That they invited the United States in under this plot on the part of George Bush Sr. and Dick Cheney. They went in and they occupied the Middle Eastern oil fields, and Osama bin Laden mounted jihad against them. This is the whole explanation for what's been going on that you've been hearing about out of the corner of your ear all this time about this whole Middle Eastern war. This is how it started. This is exactly what it's all about. It's not a matter, why are terrorists attacking the United States? Which they're not. Why are they doing this? Because they're trying to drive the United States out of their occupation of the Middle Eastern oil fields, of the Holy Lands. That's exactly what's happening here. And the United States is just raising this big thing. All these administrations, not only the Bush administration, but Obama's administration, now the Trump, these terrorists are attacking us because they can't stand our way of life. How ridiculous is that? I mean, it's completely ridiculous that these people over there who have just sticks and stones and street bombs and satchel bombs where they blow themselves up are basically attacking the United States because they don't like our way of life. I'm telling you that you need to understand what this is all about and what the relationship is. And here is Boyden Gray right here. right in front of you, asserting the major defense on the part of Donald Trump against the charges of collusion with Russia is that he is quadrupling the amount of oil that's going on. And the Russian government gave the highest award available to a non-Russian to Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, for establishing a contract with Russia to develop their oil fields together. And that's what's really going on here. You really need to understand all of this. Now, I don't have the slightest suspicion that you're going to remember all of that right now. That's a little complex, and there's a lot of names going on in there. But what I want to tell you, this is so profoundly fundamental to understanding what's going on here and what's affecting your whole lives, and why it is that the Trump administration is trying to quadruple the amount of oil in the whole world being generated in the face of global climate change. He is poisoning our planet. He is destroying the potential happiness of you and your children and your grandchildren because of this major political thing that's going on in the world. For the Anglos to basically occupy the Middle Eastern oil fields and to control the oil as a major resource on the planet. So I wanted you to see this. This is the definitive piece of laying out the information against the Trump administration for collusion and obstructing. I want you to take a look at the opposite argument, which is the Spygate argument. Okay? I want you to take a look at that over the weekend. And what's going to happen is coming back in on next Tuesday and Thursday, Dr. John Conway is going to be laying out all the information that you need to know at the beginning of the course here about global climate change, so that you really understand the fundamental threat that is being made to you and your children and grandchildren about global climate change. Because it's in that context that I want to start talking about the fact that it's not coincidental that the second thing that Donald Trump did was ordered the Dakota Access Pipeline going through against the Lakota people up in North Dakota, generating the uprising against the Dakota Access Pipeline. You're going to see how these three major events all interact with each other. The global climate change crisis, the threat to impeach Donald Trump right now, and what happened at Standing Rock. Okay, so that's the only time you're ever going to have to spend sitting the whole class watching a particular video like that. But I want you to take a look at the Spygate over the weekend, and then Dr. John Conway will be talking with you on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll be back right after that. Okay? Okay, gang, terrific, and thank you for all coming. You're getting the other people here. Thank you.
Hello friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com. No New World this week, as I'm afraid both of my children are sick at the moment. So I have no time. I'm running around after two sick children. I'm out on an errand right now getting stuff for them. So no New World next week. But boy, do I have a special treat for you. We can kill two birds with one stone. You can get your James Evan Pilato fix via Corbett Report. And you can get a propaganda watch. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a recent edition of Morning Monarchy, which I'm sure you know by now is the daily news podcast of James Evan Pilato over at MediaMonarchy.com. And I was listening to it this week, and he had a great breakdown of a CIA propaganda piece, basically a recruitment piece trying to recruit psychologists for the CIA. It's crazy stuff, and while James was playing the audio of this on his podcast, he was commenting on it, and his comments are spot on and perfect and funny and very apt. So I thought I would play that for you so that you can enjoy James Evan Pilato's commentary on this CIA propaganda.
If you're like me,
I'm not.
You want to use your psychology background for something meaningful.
Would you like fries with
something bigger than yourself. The CIA is the perfect place to make this happen. Here, your talents make it possible for us to safeguard the national security of America through the collection and production of critical foreign intelligence for the president and senior policymakers. When I come to work each day, I know I am contributing to a mission greater than myself. As a psychologist, you might be wondering where you fit in at the CIA.
Torture.
There are a number of opportunities you can
Psychological
explore.
operations.
You could be a human
Gaslighting.
resources officer,
Ooh.
where you would provide substantive advice across a full range of HR functional areas to include workforce planning, talent acquisition, staffing and selection, benefits, performance management, policy, and retention. Another exciting position is the leadership analyst. You would be analyzing
got a
and
position
producing
for you.
assessments of foreign leaders and other key decision makers in the political, economic, military, and science and technology industries. Or if you have a passion for world affairs, you could serve in the Directorate of Operations, where you would help with the clandestine collection and dissemination of intelligence from human sources. This
So
means you would be
exciting. It's
directly
like a
involved
video
in some of
game.
the most sensitive work this nation performs. The Directorate of Operations hires all backgrounds, but with your unique understanding of people, you may be better positioned to understand foreign nationals with access to information vital to our national security interests. Psychologists have successful careers as collection management officers, operations officers, or
Torturers.
staff operations officers. No matter what professional path you choose, a career in the CIA will give you a unique role in keeping not only the United States, but the world safer. You have a lot of career choices in the CIA. Now the only question is, where do you want to serve? For more information on available opportunities, please visit cia.gov/careers.
Thank you, James. Now, I trust most of my viewers were able to pick up on the various bits and pieces that James was dropping out there like cookie crumbs. And it sounds humorous, but all of those little things that he was saying have some meaning and resonance to them. For example, when he brings up, what can the psychologists do at the CIA? Torture? Yeah, there's a real story behind that. And if for people who don't know, I'll throw a link into the article about Martin Seligman, who did the work on learned pessimism, learned optimism, and then how basically the military came in and said, hey, how can we turn this to our to our advantage for torture purposes? So again, there's crazy stuff behind all of this that was being said there. But it was a great breakdown. I love to hear that, so I thought I'd share it with you. And that's going to do it for Propaganda Watch this week. I hope to have another podcast out later this week, but we'll see. We'll see how things go with the children. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Looking forward to talking to you again as soon as I can. James Corbett, CorbettReport.com.